How's that for a slice of fried gold?
You think this is a fucking costume? This is a way of life.
I'll be back.
There's a flesh wound. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
Take your sticking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
I was building a poop path for my dogs before we, yeah, like because they won't go poop in the snow because they're too short for the snow. So it's already up to their asshole, but they won't just like let it go. You have to squat like a dog, I guess.
Oh, so you were shoveling snow just for your dogs to go poop?
Yeah, I made like a little path out into the yard and then a big square. Yeah, that they could poop and pee in, that they'd feel good about.
Banjo walked outside about 5 feet and peed and pooped right on my patio, and the because he couldn't tell it was a patio; it's covered in snow. Of course. And then the Yorkie, well, Bruno took one step outside, immediately did a 180, and walked right back in.
Yeah,
he's like,
that's how they were being. So I was hoping the poop path would work. So far, they've peed.
Don't eat that yellow snow.
No. Well, this has been the first year that Max has actually played in the snow. He doesn't. Oh. He's not a fan of precipitation in all forms. But this has been the first one where he's romped around. Although we can't tell if he's romping for fun or if it's like, oh, it's cold here. Whoop. No, it's cold here too. Oh, it's cold here too.
He's just confused.
It's cold everywhere. What is happening?
Speaking of yellow snow, I watched the Jackass movie a couple days ago. The original, the first one from like 2002 or something.
Yeah, I watched that not too long ago.
Man, it's hilarious.
Cat has adamantly refused to watch those.
That's so weird. That's how my wife is too. I watched all of them a little while back, and Jennifer was not having them.
Yeah, Bunny watched the first one with me. I think she'll watch the other one. She, I don't think she ever watched the show like I did, but she watched it sporadically. I was obsessed with it. I loved that show in high school and stuff. And watching it in the theater, the first movie was one of the funnest. Like, I've never heard an audience laugh that much throughout a movie, except in maybe like Borat. Those might be like the two best audience reaction movies I've ever been to. But
nice.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it holds up, but I guess it probably doesn't. If I can't imagine somebody watching it now having no concept of what Jackass is, and watching it but I've got that
definitely
that
a product of its time.
Yeah. I mean, the finale of the movie is Ryan Dunn putting a toy car up his ass and getting it x-rayed. So that is like that's the big finale. Anyway, I let you guys want a podcast.
Speaking of jackasses, these freaking kids, right?
They are a bunch of jackasses.
Kids.
42 kids.
One island.
42 kids.
In a world.
In a country.
In a country.
What are we doing, Todd?
I don't know what's happening. I was going to let him go. Well, hello and welcome to Cinema Shock. It's the podcast that explores the stories behind your favorite cult and genre films. I'm one of your hosts, Gary Horne.
And I'm Justin Bishop.
And I'm at...
I fucked it up.
Todd only goes by his handles on social.
That's it. Yeah, he is.
I only respond to my full internet handles.
Todd has had his name legally changed with an @ sign at the beginning of it.
I'm Todd A. Davis. At the dawn of the millennium, the nation collapsed. At 15% unemployment, 10 million were out of work. 800,000 students boycotted the schools. The adults lost confidence, and fearing the youth, eventually passed the Millennium Educational Reform Act, also known as the first Cinema Shock Roulette episode.
Wow, he went for it. I really wish you would have done that completely in Japanese.
That would have been awesome. I will say your delivery was better than when you gave us that joke in the and the pre-production.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did the movie guy, the Mr. Movie Phone voice.
A little bit. Yeah. That's the level of professionalism I try to bring to the show, guys.
Yeah, so this is a first in what will be kind of a recurring feature here on Cinema Shock Roulette. These are one-off episodes that are kind of standalone. They're about films that we kind of explained this last week, but if you haven't listened to that, because maybe you haven't seen The Matrix Resurrections, these are kind of episodes that we're going to be inserting in between longer series, because they're movies that we want to talk about, but we might not be able to fit them into a series or anything like that. But we still think they're important to talk about. They're important parts of the history of cult cinema, so we don't want to just skip over them. I mean, yeah, we could do a whole Kinji Fukasaku series, but it would last 5 years. so we're not going to do that. So for the first episode in this Cinema Shock Roulette series, we're discussing a cult film from the year 2000 that's often regarded as one of the best films by its prolific director. It's been called one of the best films of the 2000s, and it's one that Quentin Tarantino, back in 2009, called his favorite film of the past 2 decades. He was interviewed around the time of Inglourious Basterds, and they were asking about his favorite movies that had come out since his debut, since Reservoir Dogs in 1992, and he named this film the number one movie of all the movies released since 1992. So The Condemned, starring Stone Cold Steve Austin. Yes, it's basically the same movie, but
this movie would have been amped up with Stone Cold Steve Austin, I gotta say.
Tarantino loved this movie so much, in fact, that he cast one of his actors in an instrumental role in his own Kill Bill, which we talked about 1 year ago this week, I think, actually, somewhere around then. Yeah. Nice. So this is a film that was a cultural phenomenon, one that proved to be influential, not only in its native Japan, but internationally, inspiring everything from books to video games. And we are, of course, talking about Kinji Fukasaku's Battle Royale.
Hunger Games. Sorry.
He's got I can tell now he's got a list of all of these movies over there he's working off of. I know he does.
All right, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm an asshole. Sorry, go ahead.
So Battle Royale is based on a novel of the same name written by an author named Koushun Takami. And that novel, which was Takami's first, was originally completed in 1996, although it wasn't actually published until 1999. Takami claims to have been inspired by a dream. I feel like we hear this a lot on the show. Like we talked about that on last episode on Resurrections. Lana Wachowski having the idea for that while she was like trying to fall asleep.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure like Paul McCartney wrote Hey Jude based off a dream he had.
Yeah, and drugs.
Really?
Drugs, yeah. But he dreamed the melody or something.
This is actually very similar to Lana Wachowski, because she was like trying to fall asleep and couldn't sleep, and this idea came to her. And the same thing kind of happened to Takami. He says that he was in this kind of half awake state. You know that state that you're in where you start dreaming, but you're also still awake, and you're not really sure where you're
now.
At.
You're just quoting The Matrix, Justin. Come on.
But he's laying on his futon, and he's in this kind of half awake, half asleep state, and he gets this mental image of a teacher standing in front of a class announcing, "Today, I'm going to have you kill each other." And this idea like pops into his head. So he starts workshopping ideas based on this singular image.
He said the image of the teacher grinning as he spoke was so vivid to him that he was laughing, but he was also very terrified.
Yeah, terrified of his own brain. So he starts discussing it with some friends and workshopping it and building a story around this idea. He adds in the social and political aspects of the story. He was actually influenced in a large part by Japanese student uprisings against police brutality in the late 60s, which is when he was growing up, something that he saw firsthand. And he, of course, based a lot of the book's depiction of totalitarian government on his favorite Stephen King book, The Long Walk, which, if you haven't seen, is about what is the term didn't exist then, but what is essentially a reality TV series about these people that are on this road, a long walk. It's being televised for the entertainment of the masses, but there's all sorts of instruments of death along the way, let's say.
Oh, wow.
Really good.
There's a novel, or one of the publishings of the novel, there's an interview with Takami at the end of it that he references The Long Walk, and Robert Parker, who did the Spencer series. I'm not super familiar with that, but he listed those as influences. Kuwata's final line in the book is, "That's what I want." Apparently that's like ripped straight from Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. And the children's hometown in the book is called Shiroiwa, which is its direct translation is Castle Rock. And
wow.
yeah,
That's pretty cool.
Yes, let's be straightforward for a second too, and get to the question that I know is on everybody's mind. Yes, Takami is a pro wrestling fan, and that is how he came up with the name Battle Royale.
Yeah, of course.
Nice.
And, so for those that don't know, a Battle Royale in wrestling is where a bunch of people are in the ring and you throw each other over the top rope. In fact, as this episode airs on January 29th, the Royal Rumble is happening, which is perhaps the most famous of the Battle Royales in pro wrestling. Yeah, there was an article with him in Polygon, and it said what really interested him about this concept was the social aspect of the Battle Royale, the way former enemies could come together to overcome a superior opponent, and that friends and partners would be forced to betray each other for their own glory. This, more than anything else, is what makes this book so horrifying. The fact that the rules necessitated betraying someone important to you in order to ensure your own survival. He said he actually originally intended that the book might be a little bit lighthearted and fun, but since he was a pro wrestling fan, he also wanted to have the air of sportsmanship surrounding the whole affair. And but he kept coming back to this element of betrayal and how there is, in his words, a huge difference between being double-crossed by your friend and pinned for the enjoyment of a crowd, being double-crossed by your friend and shot dead. So, that was kind of his thought process, I guess.
So if you were playing Cinema Shock Bingo and we're wondering if we were going to have a wrestling reference on this one, there you go. I was
Todd jumped in with Stone Cold right at the beginning. So
I was wondering how long into the episode we were going to get before Gary mentioned the Royal Rumble, and it turns out about 5 minutes.
That's true.
So you mentioned Robert Parker. He wrote those Spencer novels. You might not be familiar with the novels, Gary, but he did. There was a TV show based on it called Spencer for Hire that was pretty popular back in the 80s, which starred Robert Urich and his partner, played by a gentleman named Avery Brooks that Todd might be familiar with.
Yeah, I am.
So there you go.
Commander
he also
Benjamin Sisko from Deep Space Nine. For those who don't
I think he got his own. I think he got his own spinoff for a little while on that, or something along those lines. His character.
So
yeah. Anyway, I've never read any of the books, so I'm not sure how they relate to Battle Royale. They doesn't seem like
I think those were like his favorite things, and so he had like I forget now. There's stuff about it in the interview, but something about that character he really liked, and that was like his initial idea for a book that he was going to write, and it turned into this whole other thing.
Gotcha. Well, he ends up writing the book. Again, it was about 1996 when he wrote it, and it got entered into the 1997 Japan Horror Fiction Awards, but was eventually rejected during the final round of the awards due to its controversial subject matter, which resulted in no winner at the awards that year. Because all three members of the final round selection committee, they're trying to decide between the final books, decide on a winner, and all three of the members of like the jury or whatever, they agreed that it was actually the best work of the year, but declined to give it an award due to its content. So they're like, this is the best, but we can't give this an award because of
bullshit.
It's really weird, right? So but the thing is, they didn't give the award to anyone else. They didn't think any other book deserved the award over it.
Yeah.
Well, so crazy? I was looking more into this when I saw this, and so the real problem seems to be is that like right before this, there was an issue where a 14-year-old student in Japan.
I mean, this is more than an issue.
Yeah,
this is a major crime.
Yeah, well, so a major crime. A 14-year-old student murdered one of their peers and left the victim's severed head behind in the classroom for the other students to find. Then also admitted to having beaten a schoolgirl to death and attacking another one. And so people were kind of up in arms that the similarities were a little too much. And so they disqualified Battle Royale. Basically.
This really has something for every member of the family to enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this was real life. And so they were like, too soon.
Yeah. I mean, and I understand that.
We'll probably get into it later, but it's been tied to a bunch of different like true life crime events.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah,
it has. And of course, as we know, we've talked about this on the show before. When a work gets this type of reputation, especially before its release, whether through controversy or censorship or whatever, it makes people just want to see it that much more. So when Battle Royale was published in April of 1999, it became an immediate hit. It sold more than 1 million copies before being translated into nearly a dozen languages. And then only a year after its release, the novel was adapted into a manga that was also written by Takami. And he actually, from what I understand from interviews with him, he actually seems to prefer the manga to the novel because he was able to tweak some of the characters in ways that he didn't think worked completely before. And the manga was incredibly popular as well, possibly even more popular than the novel. And then, of course, after the manga, we got a feature film directed by Kinji Fukasaku and written by his son, Kenta Fukasaku.
Oddly, he has not done anything since.
I know, isn't that strange?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is not
the son?
The writer, the novel.
Oh, the writer.
Yeah. Because this book was huge and he hasn't really done anything else.
Wow.
The last thing I can find from him is him like posting something about how a publisher had said he wasn't going to write anything anymore. And he was like, that's not true. I never said that. And supposedly was working on something, but just never.
It's been 22 years.
But nothing's ever happened.
So let's talk a little bit about Kinji Fukasaku. Okay. So Fukasaku was born in Mito, which is in the northwestern region of Japan in 1930. So when he was about 15 years old, his class was drafted and he worked as a munitions worker during World War II. He worked in a munitions factory. His entire class worked in a munitions factory during the war. And then after the war, he immersed himself in film, watching a lot of films that were made outside of Japan. He got really into that stuff. And eventually he would study cinema at Nihon University. So after graduating in 1954, he became an assistant director at the famed Toei Studios. We talked about that actually back in our Kill Bill series. I want to say that was during the Lady Snowblood episode, if I remember correctly.
I think that you're right. Yes.
Yeah. He made
the reason I say that is because Fukasaku, his wife and mother of his baby mama, is Sane Nakahara, who is the bad lady in Lady Snowblood. She's the female member of the gang.
Okay,
just for a callback.
And Miko Kaji, who plays Lady Snowblood herself, actually appeared in some of his films back in the 70s as well. He made his directorial debut in 1961 with two featurettes being not quite feature length, but not quite short length. They're about 50 some odd minutes a piece. He made two of them called Drifting Detective, Tragedy in the Red Valley. And then its sequel came out later that same year called Drifting Detective, Black Wine in the Harbor, which is a fucking cool name. Both of those starred Sonny Chiba.
Yeah, apparently, like in back in the day when you sign on with like a studio like that, like Toei, like they'll give you like these little short featurette style movies to like test your chops or get you used to directing or something like that, and
see what you're made of.
Yeah, see what you're made of. And so like Sonny Chiba, who we obviously we talked about him a lot with the Kill Bill thing. He was discovered by Toei Studios in a talent contest in 1959. And
he was still very early in his career at this time.
Yeah, these two would end up being linked for quite a while. Fukasaku gives Chiba his first lead roles. They end up being friends forever. And Chiba was regularly in his movies, like the ones you mentioned. And then there's this Funky Hat series he does. He's in Battles Without Honor and Humanity 2, Hiroshima Deathmatch, Virus, Samurai Reincarnation.
That's the same one that Miko Kaji is in, is the second one.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So then, basically Fukasaku is Scorsese to Chiba's De Niro, but Chiba's not Battle Royale. So more on that some other time, I guess.
Yeah. We'll do the Street Fighter one day. That's a good That's a good Cinema Shock Roulette episode. Street Fighter, Sister Street Fighter. We'll do a little double feature or something. But
sweet.
So Fukasaku spends the next 2 decades making his name as a director of Yakuza films, although he did also direct the 1968 Japanese-American sci-fi co-production, The Green Slime. So he veered a little bit into the horror sci-fi stuff, but mostly Yakuza films. In 1970, he was recruited to direct the Japanese scenes of another U.S.-Japan production, Tora Tora Tora, after Akira Kurosawa pulled out of the project. That was a very famous movie about Pearl Harbor. It came out in 1970. So it was showing basically Pearl Harbor from both the American and Japanese vantage points. And they had an American director doing the American stuff, and in this case, Fukasaku doing the Japanese side of things. So at this point in his career, Fukasaku was already a well-respected director in Japan, even having his film Under the Flag of the Rising Sun selected as Japan's entry for Best Foreign Language Film for the 1972 Academy Awards.
Cool.
And it was that next year, though, 1973, that saw Fukasaku releasing one of his most influential movies, one that Gary mentioned it briefly there, but it was the groundbreaking Yakuza film, Battles Without Honor and Humanity. Otherwise, this series is also known as the Yakuza Papers, depending on kind of where you look. The Yakuza films have been around for a long time, and the genre had mostly up to now been tales of chivalry set in the pre-war period, before World War II. But Fukasaku took this more kind of ultra-violent documentary style approach to these films. He was very much inspired by the French New Wave. If you watch the Battles Without Honor and Humanity film, there's a lot of handheld camera work. There's even freeze frames, as when someone dies and the name flashes on the screen, so and so died this day, very documentary like, which is something we actually see pop up in Battle Royale later. And he sets the film in a very chaotic post-war Hiroshima. It's an incredible film. I actually watched the first 3 Battles Without Honor and Humanity films this week, including the one with Sonny Chiba, which has been my favorite of the bunch so far, because Sonny Chiba is incredible in that movie. He plays kind of a villain in it. But the Battles Without Honor and Humanity is the best thing I could describe it as is that it's like the Japanese Godfather. Nice. It's basically about all these Yakuza families in Japan, and it takes place over the course of many, many years. And they're a little tough to follow at times, because over the course of the 5 films in the original series, because they brought the series back later on in the 90s. But in those early films, they introduce you follow probably 100 different characters over the course of 5 films. So they can get a little hard to follow at times, but it just creates this tapestry of this epic story about the Japanese underworld, essentially the crime world. And they're definitely worth watching if you have a chance. They're pretty easy to find streaming. They were really hard to find for years and years. And now Arrow Video put them out. They're on the Arrow streaming service. They were on Shudder streaming service, and they might still be on there. I'm not sure. But I watched them on Arrow this week, and yeah, they're definitely worth checking out if you want to look further into his career. So this film, the first one comes out. It's a commercial and critical success, and it resulted in eventually 7 sequels by Fukasaku, 5 in the initial series, plus 3 other movies based on the series that were directed by others. These all came out within the course of the initial 5 came out over the course of 2 years. 5 movies in 2 years. Yeah. So he was shooting them back to back to back and releasing them like that. Jeez. So they were big hits. And after directing several more Yakuza movies throughout the 1970s, Fukasaku left the genre, focusing instead on historical epics and science fiction films.
He's well respected in Japan, ends up becoming like head of the Directors Guild of Japan in like 96 and 97. He won the government's medal with the purple ribbon for accomplishments in film. And but after that period, like you're talking about, it's kind of strange. He ends up more as like a journeyman director. He's just like doing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, his filmography is all over the place. There's this big stretch of Yakuza movies. And then, there's a bunch of just like, I mean, the genres are all random, like all over the map. And over the course of his career, he was credited as the director of 62 films, sometimes directing as many as 4 or 5 features a year.
Jeez.
So, I mean, that's not unheard of in Japan as much as it is here, especially back in that time, like because they had a studio system that was not unlike what Hollywood had, where directors were signed a contract with a studio. And so it was more like a job a lot of times, like, hey, you're assigned to this and this and this. But even now, Takashi Miike, he came out with his 100th feature a couple of years ago, which is insane. Yeah. Yeah.
His personal life is fine, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, he's good. But Battle Royale would prove to be, out of 60 plus features, Battle Royale would prove to be his most controversial and possibly his most influential. It would also end up being the last film that he would ever complete. Fukasaku has said that his decision to direct Battle Royale is a direct result of his time working in that munitions factory back in World War II. So he tells this story. He tells us a lot in interviews. In July of 1945, the munitions factory came under fire, gets bombed. The factory employed a lot of high school age students that had been drafted to work there during the war. And during the attack, the kids couldn't escape. So they dived under each other for cover. So if you're on the top of that dog pile, you're kind of screwed. And a lot of them died, and the surviving members of the class had to dispose of the corpses of their classmates. Jeez. These are 15-year-old kids. And it was then that he realized that the Japanese government had been lying about the war, about the reasons behind the war and their reasons for entering the war. And he kind of developed a hatred and distrust of adults in general, which is something that he never really, even as he became an adult and even as he became an old man, he never really lost that. The screenplay for the film, for Battle Royale, was actually written by his son, Kenta Fukasaku, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, you don't see a lot. His son, he was a little older when he had his son. I think he was in his mid 40s or so when his son was born. So a little older than most people are. But Kenta was actually the first one that brought the book to his father's attention. He had actually seen a display for the novel in a bookstore and bought it because the striking cover, the cover's like, it's like a black background and these big bold letters, Battle Royale. If you watch the director's cut of this movie, the way the title looks on the screen, I know Todd watched the director's cut. That's the cover of the book. Those big block letters. Cool. And then it had this tagline that said 42 junior high school students, annihilate them all. That was the tagline of the book. And he's like, okay, I got to check this out. So he took the book, he buys the book, takes it home, but he didn't read it right away. He kind of, tossed it to the side. And then one day his father is visiting and he sees it lying on his kitchen counter, and it caught his attention as well. So he shows interest in it, and his son says, hey, take it home, borrow it. He takes it home. He reads it immediately, loved it immediately, and then immediately started thinking about ideas to turn this into a movie. So about 6,000 actors ended up auditioning for the film for these roles. The number was eventually narrowed down to about 800 potential cast members. And all of these 800 or so kids were subjected to a 6-month training period under the direction of Fukasaku, like physical training to see who was up for it. And of that 800, 42 were ultimately cast as the junior high students in the film. Now, I'm not going to go through all 42 of these as we talk about the cast, because that would be boring. Plus, some of them don't last very long.
I think we should pay respects and just let's list off all of the kids right now.
Hey, in order in which they died. Go ahead, Justin.
I'll just let somebody look. I'm sure there's a list out there on Wikipedia or something of them. So I'll let our listeners do a little bit of their own legwork on that one. But we will discuss some of the more notable roles in the film. Starting with the lead role, Shuya Nanahara is the main guy. He's played by Tatsuya Fujiwara. And this is one of Fujiwara's first roles. He'd later go on to be known for roles in the live-action adaptation of Death Note. He played Light in Death Note. If you've ever seen Death Note, either the American remake or the anime series, you'll know who Light is. He's one of the main characters of the story.
Oh, yeah.
And he also played the villain in the popular live-action Rurouni Kenshin films, which is another anime adaptation. The role of Noriko is played by Aki Maeda. She was only 14 years old when she made this. She was one of the few actors in the movie who was actually the age of the character that they were playing, but wow. she was one of the youngest. And she later appeared in. she was in some of those Gamera movies from the 90s, actually before this, when she was a little bit younger. She was probably about 10 or 12 when she made those. But then she was later, after this movie, she appeared in Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, which came out in 2001 and is arguably, in my opinion, one of the top 5 Godzilla movies.
Well, the title of that just rolls right off the tongue.
Well, Godzilla GMK is what is traditionally known as.
Oh, okay.
In the States, yeah. But I think Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monster All Out Attack is probably a more literal translation of the Japanese title.
Do you think they fit all of that on the ticket stub when you go to the theater? Okay.
It's a great movie. Have you seen that one, Gary? You watched all these a while back, didn't you?
I started down the path. I don't know that I've seen that one, honestly.
I would recommend it. It's a super, if your favorite thing about the Godzilla movies is just monsters beating the shit out of each other, which what else would be your favorite thing about Godzilla movies?
Of course.
Then this one's pretty high up on the list of Godzilla movies.
Nice.
An actor named Taro Yamamoto plays Kawada. So he's the one with the bandana,
the headband.
Yeah. So Yamamoto at 25 was one of the oldest actors in the film. Although, as I mentioned, very few of them were as young as the characters, but his character was actually supposed to be a little bit older. He was one of the 2 characters who was supposed to be older than the other kids anyway. And interestingly, I started looking into Yamamoto's life, and this guy's a very interesting dude. He actually left acting about a decade ago. After the Fukushima nuclear meltdown in March of 2011, he became a protester in the anti-nuclear movement. And later, he resigned from his talent agency to focus fully on activism. He essentially retired from acting to focus on activism, and he has since devoted his life to politics. In 2019, he formed a new political party in Japan, a left-wing anti-establishment party called Riwa Shinsengumi. And he actually ran for governor of Tokyo in 2020. He came in 3rd place. He got like over 10,000 votes, I think. So he's still very active and very well known in Japan as a kind of political activist.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, really neat. Another of the older actors cast in this was Mansunobu Ando. He was also 25 or 26. I've read it both ways at the time of the film. So he's 25 or 26 years old. He's the other exchange student, the one that doesn't have any lines in the whole movie, that just shoot with the kind of crazy hair, you know?
Yeah.
And I love that guy in this movie. He's got a great screen presence. He really does. He had started his career in a film called Kids Return, which was directed by Takeshi Kitano. We'll talk about him here in a minute. He later appeared in the first thing I guess probably I'd seen Battle Royale first, but another thing I'd seen him in was Takashi Miike's Sukiyaki Western Django, which is this really fun English language Japanese spaghetti Western that Miike directed. We're going to do a Takashi Miike series on this podcast one day. We absolutely have to. Obviously, we can't talk about all 100 films, but I think we could, over the course of maybe 2 or 3 series, hit some of the high notes of his career, because he is a fascinating filmmaker. And honestly, like, I love his stuff a lot.
We could just do like 100 days of Miike or something and just do just back-to-back days of it. That'd be awesome.
Oh God.
Jeez.
But yeah,
we all quit our jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If anybody wants to fund that, we'll start a Patreon for it. Yeah. Kiriyama, the man with the unlimited Uzi bullets. Yeah, he like you said, he'd been an actor in a ton of different things, but apparently he petitioned for this role. Like he really wanted this part because by his reasoning, quote, the more people you kill, the more important you are in this film.
I mean, yeah, he's not wrong. You definitely you get more screen time, I guess.
Yeah. Kid Fukasaku was actually talks in some of the documentary stuff about being pissed at his pops for right as filming began. He came up to him and told him to rewrite this character because he needed him to be more of a lead role. I guess because in the book, like he's a student. He's not like a rando put in there, and he like leads the gang. Maybe the gang he kills at the very beginning. But he flips a coin to decide to join the game at all or whatever. Like he's kind of a psychopath and has no empathy or anything, but also doesn't care about playing this game either. But I guess the director decided he wanted a lunatic running around with an Uzi, and so
Yeah, I mean, it's fun.
wanted him to be rewritten. He said his son said he said, quote, "It turns out I don't like the decent guys after all."
So we mentioned Takeshi Kitano. He is this guy is easily one of the most famous and recognizable actors in the film. Played the class's teacher, which is also named Kitano, which I'm pretty sure, because the teacher is not named Kitano in the book, and I'm pretty sure they named him that to try to persuade Takeshi into into being in this movie. He's also known in Japan as Beat Takeshi. That's kind of his TV personality name, except when he directs films. When he's on TV, it's what he does. But when he directs films, he directs it under his name, Takeshi Kitano. And his recognizability was a big reason that he was cast in the movie. He is, I mean, it's kind of hard to explain, I guess, to American audiences, but he is sort of everywhere in Japan on TV. He is one of Japan's most successful celebrities. He's a TV presenter. He's a stand-up comedian. He is very, very famous. And the producers of Battle Royale knew that his involvement would draw a larger audience to the film. And also because he was a longtime game show host in Japan, that added kind of a sense of realism to the film's game show-like concept.
Okay.
And of course, naming him after his actual name went a long ways as well. But this would be the equivalent of I don't know.
Bob Barker.
Carson Daly. This would be like if Carson Daly was in this film in an American remake. But I mean Carson Daly in the 90s, I guess.
People don't know this, but the voice is actually loosely based on Battle Royale.
But yeah, I mean, this is Ryan Seacrest. This is the Ryan Seacrest of Japan.
Ryan Seacrest going on the murderous rampage that we know is eventually going to happen.
Oh, it's right behind those eyes. It's just murder. So this was actually not the first time. Takeshi Kitano and Fukasaku, they had wanted to work together for a long time, and they were actually originally supposed to work together back in the late 80s. There's a movie called Violent Cop that Kitano made in 1989. It was his directorial debut. He's gone on to be a very well-respected director. He stars in this movie, Violent Cop, but he received a lot of critical acclaim and awards for all of his films. I mean, one Japanese film critic called him the true successor to Akira Kurosawa, which is saying something.
Some high praise.
But Violent Cop was originally supposed to be directed by Fukasaku, with Takeshi in the lead role, and the two of them, had wanted to work together ever since. I can't remember why Fukasaku didn't direct that. I think it was a scheduling thing, something simple like that. So yeah, Takeshi ends up taking over as a director and making his directorial debut and basically creating a whole second career as a director.
Nice. Yeah, it's weird to imagine him as a game show and a comedian, or a game show host and a comedian to me, because he's got kind of this deadpan attitude in the movie. But according to him, that was the director's decision. He said he believes his role is to please the director, and he was told to play this as your authentic self, just in your normal demeanor. And so he's just kind of casually, I don't know. I guess that's how he is in real life.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird to me because I've never seen any of his comedic stuff, but I've seen, obviously, I think this is probably the first thing I saw him in. I've also seen Outrage, which came out about 10 years ago or so. It's part of a series of Yakuza movies that he directed and stars in. I think there's probably 2 or 3 of them at this point. But I'd seen that, and that's another very serious, very violent film. And I'd seen his Zatoichi remake where he plays Zatoichi the Blind Swordsman. And it's none of those at all hint that he's any kind of comedian, He was also in Johnny Mnemonic, by the way. Small role in that.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, so you may remember. You if you go watch Johnny Mnemonic now, you will recognize him.
Yeah, he plays Dolph Lundgren.
He does. He's the Jesus prophet.
He plays Dolph Lundgren playing the Jesus prophet. That's the level of comedy this guy deals with.
So his comedy. Yeah. Okay. All
right. So there are a couple of other notable actors in the film, some of the more notable roles. Those include Ko Shibasaki as Mitsuko. She's the one, the kind of the pretty girl who goes crazy, who's always doing her makeup. She's kind of one of the sub villains, I guess you'd say. And Chiaki Kuriyama as Shigusa. So Kuriyama is probably most recognized to faces to Western audiences and to listeners of Cinema Shock. She's probably one of the most recognizable faces in the film, actually, because she appears in Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill as Gogo Yubari. And that was a role that she got specifically because of her work in Battle Royale.
Yeah, this is that movie that Tarantino says, like, if I could pick any movie that I wish I had done, it would be this one. It's like that quote's plastered everywhere around this film. But I love Mitsuko, though. I think she's great. But
I love her. I think she's really great. And
she's wicked.
She is, and she's got that actress has a great screen presence. I mean, I haven't seen her in anything else that I'm aware of.
The only thing I know of that she's done, I mean, most of her stuff is like Japanese stuff. She is like the main chick in Keanu Reeves' 47 Ronin.
Yeah, I haven't seen that though. But yeah, you're right. I did read that she was in that.
Yeah, so she's mostly Japanese. She's still working though.
Yeah. So we've been talking about the cast a little bit here, and I'm almost afraid to ask because I don't have high hopes for this next segment. But Todd, any luck finding any Star Trekkers on this one?
Well, I had a feeling that this was going to be a little tricky because I usually, for folks who are unfamiliar with our little segment called Who Am I Trekking With, where I look through the cast to see if any of them have been on Star Trek. Taking a page from the Wachowski stuff, who, they're heavily influenced by Asian cinema and Asian storytelling. I was like, I don't know that I'm going to find a lot of these folks. I'm betting there's probably not a lot of crossover here with Star Trek. So I went through the entire cast. That's
a lot.
Yeah. And this is what I normally don't do. I went through the entire production crew.
Jesus, wow. Todd, what commitment to a bit.
I know. In all of that, I found one single person.
Hey, that's more than I thought you were going to find. I'll be honest.
His name is John Snyder.
That doesn't sound like someone who's in this movie.
Where's John Snyder?
I'm getting to that. He is the English dub voice, uncredited, of course, of Kitano. He provides the voice of the teacher. And he also appeared on Star Trek: The Next Generation in season 3, episode 7, The Enemy, which was in 1989. He played Centurion Bakra, and then he appeared again in season 5, episode 13, The Masterpiece Society. That's in 1992. This time as Aaron Connor. But if you'll indulge me for a few minutes, this guy has actually had a pretty interesting career. Just briefly here, he was in The Warriors in 1979. He was in Crocodile Dundee in 1986. He was in Eraser 1996 with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
We should just do a bonus episode on John Snyder.
Honestly, after I get to some of these things, he might warrant a bonus episode. He has provided the English dub for a lot of my favorite animes, including multiple Ghost in the Shell sequels, Big O from 2000, Outlaw Star 1998, multiple Mobile Suit Gundam sequels, and he is the bartender in 1988's Akira. He appeared in the original Broadway cast of Bent and the world premiere of Dennis Spidalery's Vicious. And speaking of Vicious, he portrayed the role of Sid Vicious in the original play, which of course inspired the movie Sid and Nancy in 1986. Wow. Yeah, he also had a small role in the film, but of course the lead went to Mr. Gary Oldman. A little bit further, just briefly, born in Boston, Massachusetts, August 23rd, 1952, graduated from Melrose High in 1970, got his BFA from Boston University College of Fine Arts. He studied under John Abbott, who is also a veteran actor and alumni of Star Trek. He was in Star Trek, the original series, season 1, episode 26, Errand of Mercy from 1967. Highly trained in the following dialects: Appalachian, Australian, British, Brooklyn, Canadian, Cockney, French, German, Greek, Irish, Italian, Middle Eastern, Minnesota, New England, Boston, New York City, Russian, Scandinavian, Scottish, Slavic, Eastern European, South African, Afrikaans, Spanish, and Yiddish. But one of the cool things that he does is because he has done so many English dubs of different things overseas and a lot of video games, is he doesn't want to take away anything from any of the people who originally portrayed those. So he works under a lot of pseudonyms. He worked under a lot of different stage names. He's also known as Chet. Excuse me. He is also known as Chet Huntley, aka Ivan Buckley.
Those are porn names.
I was going to say that. These are his porn names, clearly.
AKA Jack Emmett, AKA Jack Kinch, AKA Stephen Martello. So yeah, he's had a very interesting career. Seems like a nice guy, very respectful of other performers and artists, and he is who we are trekking with this week. And
nice.
that's everybody in Star Trek.
Maybe you can get him on the computer resume for an interview one day.
He's still alive, still working. Yeah. So
I'd like to go ahead and send a shout out to all of the listeners right now listening to this 10 years from now, that we're sitting here from the biography of Mr. Snyder, written by Todd A. Davis. Obviously, you heard about this podcast in the forward of that book, so we're glad you're here.
You mentioned Ghost in the Shell. I don't think I mentioned it, but Takeshi Kitano is in Ghost in the Shell, the American live action remake starring Scarlett Johansson. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he's one of the main characters in that. So, well, thank you for the commitment to your Star Trek bit there, Todd.
No problem. AKA Felix Cooper. There you go.
I still think those are all porn names. Honestly, none of those sound real. So Kenta, the son of Kinji Fukasaku, he was, as we mentioned, he was the screenwriter on this, but he became a producer on it. And he became a producer because the studio, Toei, so Kinji Fukasaku is kind of known as what's the word? He's unpredictable. He's a wild card.
Loose cannon.
He's a loose cannon. They were kind of worried. Toei was kind of worried about him just making weird decisions, and they actually promoted Kenta to producer to keep an eye on his father, to rein in any of his crazier impulses.
Oh, wow.
So like things like him wanting to cast a 26-year-old, the studio was kind of against that. And Kenta tried to talk him out of it, but that was one that Kinji was not budging on. But yeah, he was on set every day, not just as screenwriter, but as a producer, but also as sort of not a spy for the studio, but kind of just like keeping an eye on things, making sure it doesn't get too out of hand.
He's the unspoken insurance policy, just right. Just making sure he's the grease in the wheels, grease in the cogs. Yeah.
There were things in the filming of the movie. I mean, I saw with him that he had to talk his dad down from. Fukasaku wanted to do a burning the bodies scene where they were like setting the corpses of the kids on fire and stuff like that. And he apparently they argued over that one. And he was able to convince him because he said it would have too much of a documentary feel, which this movie has a bit of, but also he was the director. Fukasaku was more interested in keeping it action based, so the violence wasn't totally real the whole time or anything. But anyway, so yeah, I guess there were little things like that they did rein him in on.
But other than that, unfortunately, I don't have a ton of information about the actual filming process, like the shoot of the film. It's funny. I got the Arrow 4K of this, which is outstanding, by the way. It's really great.
Nice.
It's got both versions of the film on it, and there's quite a bit of behind the scenes footage. I was talking with Todd about this before the show, and I was like, man, it's kind of a fly on the wall kind of documentary where there's like one documentary on it that's like an hour long, 50 some odd minutes long, but there are no talking heads, there's no interviews, it's just a camera following people around on set, which is very interesting to watch if you're interested in like the filmmaking process, especially this director's filmmaking process, which is very different from what you might see from American directors. He does a lot of screaming into a megaphone. He does a lot of that. He yells a lot. But there's not a lot of like actual like anecdotes about the making of the film,
Yeah, I've got I got the Blu-ray set that comes with this and part 2, and the theatrical as special edition version. I think I watched the special edition version, but
Me
yeah, I
too.
know what documentary you're talking about. I think I watched that this morning because it's like they weren't really trying to make a documentary necessarily,
Right, yeah,
They're
yeah.
like it because they had footage that they could maybe use later in a documentary if they
But
wanted to.
Yeah, they didn't throw any talking heads or anything into it.
Yeah, and it's like when they're talking to the kids, they're like literally asking them things like, "Are you in love with someone?" You know, and yeah, do you have a girlfriend, or like what makes you happy? What is your dream?
And there are a couple of shorter ones on at least on the set that I got that were clearly like made for Japanese television. And it's the same kind of thing, though, just kind of interviewing the kids about kind of random stuff or hearing their thoughts. I mean, there's a bunch of kids, and it's interesting to watch because it's kind of an interesting window into a completely different culture, and the way that films are promoted in Japan versus here, but not terribly informational.
Yeah, I mean, most of the stuff I got from it was just that, like, they began shooting on June 20th of 2000.
Yeah.
And then last day was September 2nd of 2000. Of course, they came back several months later.
I did find that they shot the film all over Japan, but the main location, that island, was an actual uninhabited island called Hachijo Kojima, which was several hundred miles south of Tokyo in the sea.
AKA Joe DiMucci.
So other than, I say it's uninhabited, but it was inhabited by wild goats, which you see a lot of in that footage on those Blu-rays. A lot of goats just hanging out in the background.
I mean, there's like little fun facts I saw, like no stunt doubles, none of that stuff for these kids. They did everything.
Yeah, there was
very
because in going through and putting together, whom I'm trekking with, I was like, I got to the stunt section and there was one name. I was like,
yeah,
no, come on.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. And there actually aren't a lot of, I think only 2 actors actually got squibbed. I think they don't, granted, if you watch the special edition, there's a lot of CGI blood added to that.
Yeah.
Which is like the questionable part of the special edition is like when you see that, that's the part that stands out the most, I think.
Sure.
Blood.
Yeah.
Beat Takeshi did that, or Kitano did he actually did that painting.
Yeah.
It's nice.
At the end.
Yeah, the painting great. At the end.
Oh, that. Where is that painting?
I don't know. I hope it's probably in his house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's framed in his bathroom.
So we've talked a lot on various episodes on this podcast about filmmakers battling with the MPAA over the content of their films. Now, this is obviously not a distinctly American experience. And in fact, many other countries have censorship boards that are run by the government that are designed to oversee film ratings, which is actually the reason that the MPAA here in America was originally created. It was created as an unbiased organization to help keep the governments from censoring films, especially during the era of the Hays Code.
Mm.
After World War II, Allied forces stationed in Japan took over the role of censoring films in Japan. And then in 1949, under the instruction of U.S. occupational forces, Japan's film industry actually created its own self-regulating organization, which was based on the Hays Code. And to this day, that organization, which is known as EIRIN, EIRIN, which is a abbreviation of a much longer Japanese name that I'm not going to try to pronounce here, but they're pretty well known as EIRIN. So they're in charge of handing out ratings for films in Japan. Still, they're still around. Whereas the Hays Code, went away, MPAA took over. And you could do a whole podcast about the history of the MPAA, but so this is Japanese version of that essentially. And their ratings are pretty similar to the US's. There's a G rating, general audiences. There's a PG-12 rating, obviously similar to PG-13. And then there are actually 2 different restricted ratings. There's the R15 and the R18. So those are age restricted ratings that only allow viewers over the ages of 15 or 18. And I don't know that they allow you to go in with a parent or guardian like an R-rated movie. From what I understand, they function a little more similarly to like an NC-17. Like if it's an R15 film, if you're under 15, you're not getting in with or without a parent. That's what I understand. If I'm wrong about that, if anyone who is more of an expert in Japanese cinema, please let me know. But that's kind of what I understood from it.
I want to know how much
wild that, like,
or how much or how many severed heads make up that difference for that 3-year
Well,
gap.
if
I was just about to say, like,
if it's one titty, it's an R15.
Right.
If it's both, is it both titties? R18.
Yeah, you got to be 18 to see two titties at the same time.
well, aka Harry Malloy.
What?
I don't even get that. I don't know what that means.
I don't know. Are you still just naming that guy's pseudonyms?
Yeah. Still going. Yeah, still going.
Harry Malloy is the person that stars in the R18 films.
Yeah.
So R15 is probably the rarest rating for a film to get, but nonetheless, when Battle Royale went before the ratings board, that's exactly what they gave it, an R15. And Fukasaku was not happy. He opposed the ratings. He had made the film for viewers the age of the characters in the film. He wanted junior high kids to see this movie. So with that rating, many of them, including the main actress in the movie, she was not old enough to go see the movie in the theater. She was not allowed to see it because she was only 14. So he submitted an appeal, but before the board could rule on the appeal, the members of the National Diet, which is Japan's government legislature, basically it's like their House of Representatives. The
Or
National
a sad
Diet
dad band.
Did you read that McSweeney's article about your favorite sad dad band?
Yeah,
it's good. But the National Diet said that the film was harmful to teenagers, and furthermore, they actually criticized the film industry's ratings. So Fukasaku ended up dropping his appeal to appease the Diet because he was worried, because this had led to them criticizing the industry as a whole. He was actually worried that they would pursue an increase in film regulation if he kind of pushed the subject. So he did what any self-respecting film director would do, is that he went to the press and he made a statement encouraging kids to just sneak into the movie, which they did. A lot of them snuck into the movie.
And tell the National Diet to just go focus on carbs and not eating certain things after a certain time of day and things like that.
He was essentially like, if you're wanting to know how to deal with the parents that don't want you to see this film, you've got to sneak into this film to see see what it's all about. This is what you do from here.
And of course, as we've learned time and time again on this show, when someone censors or attempts to censor a work of art, all they're doing is shining a light on it. All they're doing is making people want to see it that much more. It becomes that much more appealing. Like, oh, you don't want us to see it? Now I've got to see it because I've got to know what you think I shouldn't be allowed to see.
Exactly.
That's
what's the fuss
time.
about? I need to know. So it's immediately you're just asking for it to become more popular.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened here. So despite the government's attempt to censor the film or at least limit the audience with its rating, the film was a massive success when it was released. It was released on December 16th, 2000. It would go on to gross 3.11 billion yen, which is almost $30 million in American dollars. That made it the third highest grossing film of 2001 in Japan after Spirited Away and Pokemon Forever, which is huge because those two films are still considered massive Japanese films 20 years later.
And I mean, looking at the marketing, like both of those like aimed at children. And we know from movies here in the States, the stuff that's aimed at kids does really, really well because you're not only paying, like the adults are buying the tickets. So the adults buy one for themselves and one for the kids. So the grosses are huge on those.
And they've already cut out half the population by giving this an R15 rating, and it still made that kind of success. Imagine what it could have done if they'd given it like a PG-12 rating. You know, but it's massively successful, still controversial, but massively successful. And then over the next 2 years, it was distributed to 22 countries across Asia, Australia, Europe, South America, and Mexico. Now, you hear that list of countries, and there is one that is conspicuously absent from that list, and that's the United States. So this film was screened to a test audience in the US in the early 2000s. But this was not long after the Columbine High School shooting, which was in April of 1999.
Yeah.
So reactions from the audience at the time were not great, because this is like less than a year after that. And so with the exception of some film festival screenings, the film was never released in the US for 11 years. It was not released in the US. There were multiple reasons why, but one of them was that Toei was kind of worried that, especially due to the Columbine shootings and because of the way that The Matrix had attracted attention in the wake of those shootings. We talked a little bit about that. They were kind of worried that they would have legal troubles if the film were released in the US. But despite all of that, and despite some reservations of the Japanese government, when the film was released in Japan and in other countries, like it was released in England pretty quickly after its Japanese release, and it received a lot of great notices from critic. It was successful. So I have to wonder, a film that we'll talk about its legacy here in a bit, but this film is pretty well respected overall. But I have to imagine there are still people out there who don't respect it as much as others.
Well, it's if you want to catch it on Japanese TV, you got to stay up pretty late, and the time zones and such. So some people have seen it now they need a nap. Wasn't my best one.
That wasn't your best segue, but
you know what? I saw where you were going with that, and I appreciate the effort.
Thanks. It was on the spot too, so I give myself some cushion for that. But yeah, there are some people unhappy with this movie. I think some people are disappointed, and so I'm prefacing this way because the reviews for this one are less funny than a lot of the films, because I think some people are just expecting like a critically great movie, and they get a little disappointed. And I think a lot of people are set with the expectation this is such a violent, horrible movie because of the way it's portrayed. And if you watch it now, it's kind of tame.
But in 2000, the landscape was a lot different, I feel.
Well, I'm just saying, but like when some of these reviews,
they're more recent.
Yeah, they're more recent. And so I think some people are disappointed there. But anyway, here's Tornike 901-190-56819.
Who you might know is on Instagram.
Yeah. This movie is full of bad acting and nonsense. Please do not watch this movie, or you'll be as mad as me to waste your time. And now I have to write 10 lines of stupidness to submit this review, because with less lines, it won't submit. This is on IMDb, so apparently this is the thing. You got to have at least 10 lines. So he says, I have to write 10 lines of stupidness to submit this review, because with less lines, it won't be submitted. The overall region can be characterized as being made up of various interconnected mountain ranges and plateaus that do not exceed 3,400 meters in elevation. Prominent features of the area include Java Keti volcanic plateau lakes, including Tabatsguri and Tavarani, as well as mineral water and hot springs. The overall region can be, it's just like,
it goes so dumb. This is a Wikipedia page about the island.
Yeah.
The other option he had was to not write a review.
Yeah. Could have done that.
Or he could have listed all the stage names for John Snyder.
Yeah. True.
Like AKA Ian Alden.
Still sounds like a porn name. Gary McBain says, I have read some people comment that this film is harrowing, brilliant, compelling, etc. I can only ask, what the fuck are you smoking? This film is so bad that it is an inadvertent comedy. The acting, plot, cheesy scenes of violence, all of it, utter garbage. This film is so bad that it's good. Quite possibly, this is the worst film ever made.
That is ever made. The
ever
first
made.
Worst film ever made.
I hate hyperbole. I could have done better with a GoPro and a MacBook is the title of this review. Absolute garbage. As the title says, I could have done this better at home with consumer grade hardware or software. This plays like a classroom project for a high school rather than the cult classic the other reviewers are talking about, which unfortunately duped me into watching this trash. It seems like no work was put into any of the fight scenes, if you can call them that. People took forever to die, and when they died, it was more reminiscent to kids playing laser tag and playing dead as kids used to do.
What about the scene where the guys just are laying there dead and naked and their dicks are just destroyed?
Like how
what
kids
kind of
used to
laser
do.
tag is that?
Yeah, it's like,
That's where
well,
you're
I don't know
playing
what
with like
neighborhood you grew
actual
up in.
lasers used to like carve things. Yeah.
David M. Klein says, 1 out of 5 stars, piece of garbage, no redeeming qualities, hammer your toe before watching to lessen the pain. That's the subject of the review. The actual review says, I'm an ordinary person, not a lover of cinema or artsy films. I like action movies and stupid movies alike. Juvenile movies are fine. Serious dramas are fine. I sat down to watch this with my girlfriend on a quiet Saturday night based on all the positive reviews. What a piece of garbage. I wish I could get back those 2 hours of my life. I see all these 5-star ratings and I wonder if I'm missing something. Then I am reminded of the song lyrics, all the people tell me so, but what do all the people know? The acting is awful. I mean, pathetic. As some kind of futuristic cautionary tale, this premise is ridiculous. As satire, the movie is pathetic. I'm racking my brain to come up with anything redeeming about this movie. Nada, zippo, zilch. If you are a regular person looking for a movie with any redeeming qualities to kill some time, I suggest you just jump off a building before you watch this.
Jesus Christ. Wow.
This is
That's not going to solve your problem if you're wanting to watch another movie, a regular guy movie, just a regular person movie.
Oh God!
Go watch fucking Free Guy starring Ryan Reynolds.
Hey,
you don't have to jump off a building.
That movie's fun.
Park Ranger says it's a good movie for regular people.
Yeah. Park Ranger says I'm incredibly stupid, and this movie's too stupid for me.
Well, hey, you know what? At least he's self-aware.
First step to solving any problem is recognizing that there is one.
Daniel says, you're telling me this dude got shot 17 times and he got up to eat a cookie? Let's see here. What else can I choose from? Hassan says this movie gave me cancer.
No, it didn't.
Let's see.
That guy's a liar.
Fine. Let's do this as the final one. The most style confused, nonsensical, horribly acted, day to night, shitty color graded. What the fuck is happening? Pot lit boy. Why can people survive 8,377 shots to the body? Why the fuck is everyone making such a teenage drama out of this killing massacre? Does everyone just pretend to like this because Tarantino does? This is unbearable. I couldn't even write something substantial about this. 3.8 on Letterboxd? Really? I'm just wondering how something as tacky as this is considered good cinema. Generic music, bland action, unnecessary love stories, terrible performances. I know this film inspired a lot of young adult dystopian thrillers, but at least they tried to level up this embarrassing material to greater scale and significance.
Ooh, oh, that's brutal. I mean, cards on the table. You guys know I love this movie, but I'm curious. Had you guys? Was this your first experience with it? What do you guys? What's your history with this film?
I feel like we watched it together back in the day. I feel like I went to your house and watched it or something.
That's probably true.
This was first viewing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you think, Todd?
I
don't like that face, Todd.
Yeah,
I don't like that face you're making.
I'm, a lot of the reviewers that we just went through felt really, really strongly about it. But yeah, the acting's not super up there. I tend to get into the characters more, and when they're all dressed exactly alike, it creates a little bit of confusion as to, okay, now who is this? And what are they, what's going on? What are they doing? I mean, I know what they're doing, but like they're all doing.
I wasn't going to say it, Gary.
But exactly alike. The what?
I said that's racist, Todd.
I said they're dressed alike. God. No. Yeah. Anyway, when they were like 40, how many? 43, 44?
42.
42 kids.
Yeah, but like two die immediately.
I was like, that is too many.
Yeah, but it only
Take
focuses
forever.
on maybe a dozen of them regularly.
Yeah. And
You know, because
I
you've got
don't know. I didn't really feel super connected with any of the stories going on. There weren't, and it was a little confusing as to like, okay, so it's the government's thing, but there are teachers involved. Like,
the government hires the teachers.
okay, well, yeah, I guess, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying it's horrible, but I don't think
It's
it
not.
aged. I don't think it aged particularly well. I mean, again, I watched the special edition, the director's cut, and it's just some of those digital squibs. Just like, what
I didn't like
we
the
doing
digital
here?
part. I did like. I mean, the Requiems. There were probably too many. Like,
Yeah,
I didn't need the one of the basketball bouncing up to that dead kid saying,
Yeah.
"Watch out for my girlfriend" or whatever,
Yeah.
But I did like the interaction between Beat Takashi and the chick. That stuff was kind of nice, and the ball game was kind of good. The basketball game, like just to see that they had all been like celebrating together and just how quickly that could turn on its head. I can see like this movie. I could see people not liking it. I could see why you wouldn't but I enjoyed it. And oddly enough, I didn't expect this, but the wife enjoyed it. And so I was kind of expecting her to give me that other side of it, but she actually was like, that's really good. I like that movie. And I don't know. It's I get what you're saying, Todd. Like I see like certain parts of it that I feel like there's stuff you're missing, or it is kind of a big leap to go from like the school to, the island of killing each other. But
Like all the kids boycotted school. What the hell were they all doing there?
I feel like I saw a bunch of reviews when I was going through them all too, or like people that were huge fans of the novels or the novel and the manga that hated the way the movie did stuff.
There are quite a lot of differences between the two, which we haven't really gone through, but if you want to go online, you can find a big list. They strayed pretty far from the novel on a lot of the characters, but the overall gist of it was there. One of the main things is that the novel is it's not set in Japan. It's set like present day instead of in the future. And it's set in this sort of fictional country of this like a unified Asia kind of country, which was something that Japan was actually working towards in World War II. So the novel kind of takes place in a present day where Japan won the war, and they've created this like big state that kind of encompasses all of Asia. So Fukasaku wanted to set it slightly in the future, but in Japan, because there's some satirical elements that he really wanted to highlight in this, because remember his distrust of the Japanese government that was created back when he was in World War II. That's a major part of the movie, and you lose that if you don't set it actually in Japan and have the actual Japanese government involved. Yeah. I mean, this movie is very much a cult film. I mean, this is a film that was released overseas, incredibly controversial, and it took over a decade to be released here in America because and then you've got over the years, you've got people seeing it in America either via bootleg copies or imported DVDs, which is how I actually watched it. Me and Gary, we probably watched that imported DVD because I had a region-free DVD player back in the day. This was before a lot of these Asian movies, before like Tartan Extreme started being released here in America.
I feel like I remember seeing this one along with like Audition and like Dark Water or something with you.
And a lot of those were imports that I had to get because you couldn't get them at the time. Now you can just go stream them anywhere. But a lot of people saw it that way because I had heard a lot about this movie. This was probably right around the time, right after Kill Bill came out, like 2005 or so. So by the time the movie gets released officially in the US in 2011, it has a considerable cult following, because for years it felt like a film that you kind of weren't supposed to see. Like it felt like you were getting away with something by getting an import DVD or getting a bootleg of it. So by the time it's released, it's like, this is a movie that is a major cult film. And of course, and there were other reasons besides fear of legal ramifications that Toei never sold the rights to the film. One of the major reasons that they didn't do that back in the early 2000s was because they were actually asking a lot of money for U.S. distribution rights. They wanted, the report that I saw said they wanted $1 to $2 million up front, which is more than any distributor was willing to give them. Plus, they expected a wide release, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon had received in 2000. They wanted this in multiplexes all across the country.
Oh, wow.
But the problem was the only distributors who had pockets deep enough to get this film into as many screens as something like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon were the subsidiaries of the major studios. In the case of Crouching Tiger, that was Sony Pictures Classics. You know, that's who they released their smaller films through. And getting someone like Sony or Disney or Warner Brothers or any of the majors to release this through one of their smaller boutique arms was pretty much a no-go because of the film's content. Like, there's no way that Disney is going to release this through Touchstone or whatever, and it's a bunch of kids getting killed a year after a Columbine. You know, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there was never going to be a guarantee that the MPAA would play ball with this. This film would have a very hard time getting an R rating without major re-editing. And most distributors are not going to release a film unrated or release a film with an NC-17 because you're limiting your audience. You're not going to pay $2 million to buy a movie and then not have the tools to make the money off of it that you need, you know? I mean, I love this movie. I've loved this movie for, gosh, going on, 15, close to 20 years now when I saw it in the mid-2000s. And I actually think it's aged very well. No, yeah, some of the effects and stuff like the squibs, that doesn't bother me, but they haven't aged incredibly well, but it's not enough to take me out of the film at all. I think the story of the film's aged very well. Most of the conversations about it are, of course, about its violence, and that makes sense because it is a very violent film. It does seem tame by some of today's standards when you've seen some horror movies that are much more graphic.
I just think people are expecting like the heads to get blown straight off the bodies. Yeah.
This is not Takashi Miike. This is not that extreme. But it is a very violent film. But there are also there's a lot of other stuff going on beneath the surface, and I think that's what makes the movie work, and what makes the movie still work today, because it is and I think you get this a little bit more in the special edition, but it's very much a metaphor about the kind of cliques that teenagers have when they're in high school. You know, and all these little, you've got the relationship between the younger and the older generation, which was something that was very much on the director's mind. It's also sort of a screed against fascist-like government control, which is something very close to the director's heart. But it's also a really fun movie. It's just a fun movie to watch, I think.
I think it's fat incel just right out the door, just waited and just started shooting people with an arrow.
Yeah. And it does help, I think, that Fukasaku, who again was 70 years old when he made this movie, he's thoroughly on the side of the kids in this movie. Even though, there are obviously heroes and villains among the kids themselves. But he always paints the film's true villains as the adults. The adults are always seen as the true villains. Even the kids that are bad, who end up being villains, you get a lot of flashbacks that kind of explain their behavior, especially in what's her name, Mitsuka?
Yeah.
Which I think that scene's only in the special edition.
That's right.
You get this idea of why she is the way she is, and it's often because of the failure of the adults in their lives. I mean, Fukasaku, even as a septuagenarian, is still siding with the kids and not with the adults, because he's had this lifelong sort of distrust of adults.
Yeah.
And I think the age of the kids is pretty crucial too, because 15, I don't know if you guys remember what it's like to be 15, but it fucking sucks. Like being 15 is like the shittiest age, because your body's going through all this weird stuff. You're getting acne, when you're 15, you no longer want or need your hand to be held by adults, really, but you're not an adult. You don't have the confidence that you do when you're 18.
And you still can't drive anywhere.
Well, yeah, you can when you're 15. You can get a learner's permit.
Well,
yes. And also at 15, kids have all these little dramas in their lives, you know, like rivalries with other classmates or crushes, and, you know, all these little things that seem, when you're 15, they seem like their life or death, which as you get older, you kind of look back on and realize how silly it was to get so up in arms about things, because once you're an adult, those kinds of things are very much like, who gives a fuck, you know? But when you're 15, that's your whole world.
Yeah.
You know, all these little dramas of high school and junior high. But imagine a 15-year-old given free rein to act out on those feelings. And all of a sudden, you've got the license to resolve any issue with your classmate, any petty little rivalry, with, you know, one clique versus another, with extreme prejudice. And you're given the license to do that. It's basically Lord of the Flies, but instead of being stranded on an island, these kids are forced into the situation by their government. Like that's pretty wild.
Yeah. That's a pretty wild concept for sure.
That sounds like he just woke up from hearing you talk about.
Yeah,
all
sorry. Yeah, I just realized. Yeah, sorry.
that. Yeah,
I'm here. I'm present. I'm in the moment.
he's
Here
still
we are.
like, but still, fuck it.
Now, due to the film's popularity in Japan, something really interesting happened that I can't personally think of another example of, but a special edition of the film was released. We've talked about it. We've mentioned it several times on the show, but what this special edition is that we're talking about, it's got an extra 8 minutes of footage, but this wasn't footage that was left on the cutting room floor the first time around, that they reinserted as like a director's cut. It is sometimes referred to as a director's cut, but this was actually mostly newly filmed material. Fukasaku gathered his cast and crew back together about 6 months after the film's release to shoot entirely new stuff, because the movie was doing well. They wanted a reason to make even more money off of it, basically. So a few months later, they go back, shoot some more footage, re-release it in theaters as a special edition with 8 extra minutes of footage. And then you've got some other stuff thrown in there as well. New opening credits, new special effects, things like that. And the material includes flashbacks to a basketball game that we mentioned, that's used as kind of framework for the entire story. That flashback I mentioned that expands on Mitsuko's backstory. If you haven't seen the special edition, maybe you only watched the theatrical, there's a flashback that she comes home, her mom's drunk, there's this weird dude in her house. Turns out the weird dude basically tries to molest her. She knocks him down the stairs and kills him. So that sort of explains her anger towards men and people in general, you know. But there are also 3 epilogues. I think, what are they called? Requiems in the film.
Yeah, Requiem.
Those are all newly filmed scenes that were not in the theatrical cut. There's some additional CGI, like the squibs we keep mentioning. So this gets released in theaters. It's also very successful. And then not long after that, work began on a sequel. Battle Royale Requiem was to see the return of Kinji Fukasaku as the director, but he unfortunately died of prostate cancer on January 12th, 2003. He shot a single scene with Takeshi Kitano, and then he got his diagnosis, had to leave the film, ended up passing away not long after that. And his son, Kenta Fukasaku, who had written the screenplay to the sequel as well. And this screenplay is based on an original idea. It's not based on a book or a manga or anything. This was a new idea by Kenta. He actually took over directing duties and finished the film, which was released in July of 2003. Gary, you said you got the part 2 as part of that box set. Did you have a chance to watch it?
I didn't have a chance to watch it. I really wanted to sit down and watch it. I heard like it got some issues for like anti-American sentiment and
we
stuff
deserve
like
it.
that. Yeah. Well, I mean,
I've never seen the sequel, so I was just curious if you had an opinion.
Yeah,
on it.
I really wanted to watch it, and just time got away from me, so I never did. I remember reading all the stuff about like remakes and stuff that were going to happen with this, and
yeah, they've talked about remakes. They've talked about TV shows. I think was the most recent remake idea that I saw. They actually released a 3D version of the original movie for its 10th anniversary in 2010. They went and Kenta, Kenji's son, kind of oversaw it, and then they released that. And I think it came out on. It was supposed to come out on DVD or something here in the US not long after the original one came out. in 2011 or so, but that release got canceled for some reason. So it's never actually been released here, the 3D version.
Yeah, I mean, I saw like producer Roy Lee had the rights as early as like 2006, and like New Line had even announced that 2008, and then like the Virginia Tech shooting happened, and so then it got put on hold again, like right after that, and then that Roy Lee had said as of around since the Hunger Games came out in like 2012, he basically said that it had kind of died because his quote was audiences would just now see it as a copy of Hunger Games. Most of them wouldn't know that Battle Royale came first. He said it's unfair, but that's reality.
Yeah, and the sequel we talked about earlier, how some real life stuff had kind of affected, say, the novel. And the sequel actually was supposed to come out on DVD in like 2004, and it actually got postponed to later on in the year because of a murder. The Sasebo slashing is what it was known as, where a 12-year-old schoolgirl was murdered by an 11-year-old female classmate. And it would apparently the perpetrator had seen Battle Royale. So they got a lot of press, obviously negative press because of that. So they had to kind of postpone the sequel's home video release as a result of that. So in the year since its release, Battle Royale has garnered a major cult following. As I mentioned before, it's often listed on lists of best movies. Honestly, you see this on best movies of all time lists. You see it on a lot of best horror movies of all time, although I personally don't consider this a horror movie. Just because a movie has gore doesn't make it horror, but that's just me. I consider action / sci-fi, I guess, was where I would place this. But still, regardless, you see this movie on a lot of lists of best of whatever. It's a very highly regarded movie, and it has, of course, become hugely influential, with the term Battle Royale coming to be redefined to refer to the type of game depicted in the film. Of course, we've mentioned the Hunger Games. It's hard not to think of the Hunger Games when you're talking about the influence of Battle Royale, although Suzanne Collins claims to have been unaware of the book and the film when she wrote the original trilogy, but the similarities are pretty striking, and that's a little hard to believe, although the author of the original novel says that, hey, sometimes writers just arrive at similar ideas from different directions. It does happen, which is true. So, who knows?
You see it in comedy all the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like Carlos Mencia, right?
Yeah.
So even recent films like the Belko Experiment, The Purge, Ready or Not, The Hunt, they owe a lot to Battle Royale. That sort of idea of people hunting people. Of course, that originated, that idea was around long before Battle Royale. We mentioned Lord of the Flies earlier. The Most Dangerous Game is another example. But the idea of it being like a game and teams against each other, this is sort of something that really Battle Royale, that's an idea that brought to the table. And of course, the recent Netflix incredible, like huge phenomenon that is Squid Game was majorly influenced by Battle Royale, which is something that show's director has fully admitted. He has fully said that, hey, this is heavily influenced by Battle Royale.
Yeah. And there's the game thing, but like, I mean, that's seriously a phenomenon right now too. Like straight up the Player Unknown, that crew, like, I mean, it kind of spawned from Minecraft and Battle Royale, the idea of like this PUBG, and like Fortnite's a huge one right now.
Yeah, a lot of video games. I mean, a lot of video games, and Fortnite's obviously probably the biggest one right now, but all these like Battle Royale style games, they are referred to as Battle Royale style games because of this movie. Because before this movie, the term Battle Royale was pretty strictly a wrestling term.
Right.
So I've got a question for you guys then, as we always do towards the end of the episode. If we get into further viewing here, if you guys were to pair Battle Royale with another film as a double feature, what are you going with? What do you pair this with? And don't say the Hunger Games.
Well, I'm out. You could do Cube. That series is kind of cool. That horror, like sci-fi kind of thing.
Yeah, I could see that, I guess. Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of Cube, but yeah, I see where you're coming from.
I was, one of the things when I see a movie like this is kind of trying to figure out if it's not something like Hunger Games, where it's like, okay, Jennifer Lawrence is going to survive. Looking at something like this with a larger cast, I always like to try to figure out who's going to survive or who done it. So I'm going to pair this. I'm going to take a hard turn on this and pair this with Clue. And
Okay.
just because
Sure,
I love to try to figure out who's going to survive, and so I love the mystery.
I think this movie pretty clearly stakes out who your final boy and final girl are.
Yeah, but not initially, not in a room full of 40 other kids.
Well, yeah, but it becomes clear pretty early on, I think.
Yeah.
You could do that Ice-T movie, The Deadly Game or whatever.
Yeah, that's based on The Most Dangerous Game. That movie is not good. It is not good. I remember renting that back in the day. It sucked. I'm gonna go with The Running Man. And we talked about the long
that when
walk.
we were talking earlier.
Yeah, we talked about The Long Walk being like a major influence on this, but the Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger from 1987, another Stephen King adaptation, is very similar to this. I think, in that in The Running Man, if I remember, the contestants are like criminals that are on death row or something.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But the government puts them all together and then broadcasts it as like a piece of entertainment, and I honestly like The Running Man. I think The Running Man's a really fun movie.
Oh yeah, it's a great one.
It's a fun one. So that would be my pick, other than I guess other movies by this director, especially Battles Without Honor and Humanity. That entire saga, I think, would be pretty good to pair with this.
You could do I guess not the same. I was gonna say that one Harry Potter movie.
The Goblet of Fire.
The Goblet of Fire.
They're not trying to kill each other, though. They're not trying to murder each other in that. That should literally just like a game.
Well, someone dies, Justin. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Whoa. I'd like to apologize for Gary's outburst.
There was the comic series. I'm surprised Todd didn't bring it up, and I remembered it now that it was like a Avengers Arena or something that happened, and that was. I was just going to bring that up just because it was based exactly on Battle Royale. Like the logo, Avengers Arena, like the AA logo is the Battle Royale logo on the comic series.
Okay.
But it's like arcade, like creates like an arena and puts like a superpowered people in the place and they've got to survive or whatever and battle with each other till there's like one left or something. So anyway, I just thought of that.
Yeah.
Interesting. I had not heard of that, but that's pretty cool. How long ago was that published?
I mean, it was a few years ago.
Maybe not more than 10 years ago. Not long.
Avengers Arena was 2012.
Okay, so about 10 years ago. Oh, and I see the copies, the cover of it's exactly the Battle Royale.
They're very
logo.
clearly,
they're not even pretending that it's not based on Battle Royale. Oh, that's cool. Very cool. I was not aware of that. I might have to go read those. So we did this as sort of a one-shot series, as part of this Cinema Shock Roulette series that we're going to be doing every now and then. Although, like I joked about it before, but you could do a whole series on Kinji Fukasaku if you wanted to, and like just highlight some of the bigger films in his filmography. But, just because this episode, this movie, Battle Royale, is not part of a larger series, doesn't mean that it's not an important, impactful piece of filmmaking. On our last series, the Wachowski series that we did, we talked a lot about the influence of The Matrix. Battle Royale may not seem as directly responsible for changes in genre filmmaking as that film was. The Matrix basically changed action movie filmmaking forever. But the influence of Battle Royale is pretty huge. I mean, whether Hunger Games is a direct, if it's directly responsible for something like the Hunger Games or not, regardless, I mean, something like we mentioned Fortnite, we mentioned, all these other movies and all these other video games, especially video games, I think, are hugely in debt to Battle Royale. This movie is a major influence on genre films. Every film that you will see from now until the end of the time that has some sort of game where people are forced to kill each other will be because of this movie and because of the book. I mean, that's a pretty big piece of, I mean, yeah, that's a niche piece of genre, but I mean, I rattled off like 5 of them earlier, including like The Purge, which I think is very influenced by this, which is what, like 6 films deep at this point, you know?
Yeah.
So
Would you
I do think
play a
that
game?
Wait, wasn't that was Jigsaw?
Yeah, that was Jigsaw. I was just saying Saw also. Like, I mean, technically,
yeah, it was a
kinda.
game. Yeah, okay, sure. It's just Jigsaw trying to kill people, but
That's a good point. Yeah, I guess it's not really everybody.
but my point is that this is, you know, although it may not seem like it on the surface, this is a major piece of genre filmmaking, and it's a huge movie. And if someone were creating a list of the most influential genre films of the last, say, 3 decades, this is absolutely towards the top of the list. I mean, it would have to be. And I think genre filmmaking is better because this movie exists. So next week, we're going to start a new series. You guys ready for this?
I'm ready
For a new
series? I've never been more ready.
We've mentioned it before. We've teased it. We're going to go into, I think we're doing 5 or so episodes on this series, because we're going to split this upcoming filmmakers' filmography up among multiple series, because otherwise we wouldn't be here like most of 2022 talking about his movies. So we're going to talk about them in stages, and this first one is going to be about probably his most well-known stage. We're going to be talking about David Cronenberg. We're going to start all the way back at the beginning. We're starting with Shivers, which is his first feature-length film, and we're going to go all the way through The Fly on this particular series. And don't worry, down the line we will talk about Crash. We will talk about A History of Violence. You know, we're going to get to those one day, but this series is going to specifically talk about his body horror stuff, which again, he's mostly known for body horror, even though that was only about a decade of his career. But they are some of the most influential horror films that he ever made. So we're starting next week with Shivers. If you guys want to watch it along with us, you can find it streaming. Head to cinemashock.net. We'll have a list of everywhere that you can find it. There on the website, you can, of course, always find every episode that we've ever done. Find all of our series grouped together. So if you want to go back and listen to the Wachowski series from beginning to end, it's there, all grouped together for you. You can find our merch. You can find links to our Discord. You can find links to our social media. Where can you guys be found as far as social media goes on the internet?
Hey, Matt, this is Gary Horne on all the things.
And if you're a fan of Star Trek, please join me and my rotating panel of family, friends, and the occasional Star Trek alumni, which we actually just secured our next cast member guest for the show.
Is it that guy we were talking about?
It is. I'm going to keep that under wraps for now. Is
the guy with the porn names. Is it the guy with the porn names?
Oh, no, not him.
You should have him. You should do a whole series of him just coming on as each of his names.
I absolutely might. But join us for the Computer Resume podcast, a show covering the entire Star Trek franchise in chronological order for fans new and old. Tomorrow, actually, I'll be recording our 1-year anniversary show with my lovely wife, Kat Davis. And
you're still on Enterprise though?
Yes, we are still on Enterprise, but that is drawing to a close. We are definitely over the halfway point with Enterprise, but we're having fun with it.
When Enterprise ends, you go straight into TOS?
No, it'll actually go into Discovery. There's a few of the short treks between there, but yeah, we'll pretty much go into Discovery after that.
All right. Okay.
And you can find,
but Discovery's not over. So how does that work?
Well, this
is behind the scenes shit. We'll talk about
it's and he can't talk about it too much because it's kind of you should watch Discovery.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it's good. But anyways, you can find the show wherever you get your podcasts, the Computer Resume podcast, and it's on all the socials at Computer Resume. I am at Mr. Todd A. Davis on all the socials, aka Keith Osterberg.
I am at Justin_Bishop, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. You can also find us at Cinema_Shock on Twitter and Instagram. Find us on Facebook. Again, we are on Discord and all that stuff as well. Head to our website to find all of that. And until next week,
may the wings of liberty never lose a feather.
And be excellent to each other.
This year's Zensuji Middle School number 4's Class E was chosen among 43,000 ninth grade classes. This year's game said to be more blistering than the last. Oh, look there. There he is. The winner's Johnny, surviving a fierce battle that raged 2 days, 7 hours, and 43 minutes. The winner is Johnny. Look, he has the keys. The keys. Johnny definitely has the keys.